You know, most people my age are out there trying to build a career or whatever. Me, I sell tickets at the Grand Majestic. I'm 22, and my highest ambition for the day is to correctly tear a ticket stub without ripping the whole thing in half. It's not exactly a life plan. The theater is a dinosaur, the kind of place with faded red velvet seats that have seen more first dates than I ever will, and carpets with patterns so loud you can practically hear them. The whole building smells of dust, decay, and that weirdly sweet scent of decades-old popcorn butter that's soaked into the wood itself. It's a dying beast, and I'm just one of the parasites living on its hide. But I'm stuck here, not just because the pay covers my rent, but because, well, it's easier than thinking about what comes next. It's quiet. Most nights it's just me, the hum of the old coolers, and maybe a handful of people who still think going to the movies is an event. It gives me a perfect excuse. Whenever my mom asks about my future, I just say, things are fine, it's a steady gig. A lie, but a comfortable one. There's another reason I stick around, though. As much as this place gives me the creeps sometimes, I don't know, it feels safe. Sounds stupid, right? A cavernous, creaking building that's probably a fire hazard. But something about it, some deep-down thing from when I was a kid, makes me feel like nothing truly bad can happen to me here. I don't think about it much. It's just a feeling. I'm a logical guy. I have to be, working here. Every shift is a symphony of strange noises. A sudden bang from upstairs? That's just the ancient plumbing groaning. A floorboard creaks in an empty hallway? The building's over 100 years old, man. Of course it creaks. You hear a whisper on the wind? It's just a draft coming through a window frame that was installed before my grandfather was born. You rationalize. You have to, or you'd go nuts. But lately, it's been getting harder to explain things away. It started a few weeks ago. The sounds. It's always late, after the last movie has ended and I'm just tidying up, getting ready to lock the doors. The place is dead, not a soul inside but me. That's when I'll hear it, a footstep from the long, dark corridor that leads to the older screening rooms. It's not a normal step, it's a heavy, dragging sound. A slow scrape, then a thud. Scrape, thud. Like someone with a bad leg taking their time. The first time I heard it, my head snapped up. I called out, "Hello?" Nothing. Just the echo of my own voice bouncing off the high ceilings. I grabbed the heavy mag light from under the counter and walked to the mouth of the hallway. The darkness in there was thick, like you could scoop it with a spoon. I shone the beam down its length. Dust motes danced in the light, revealing peeling wallpaper and doors to theaters that hadn't been used in years. Nothing, not a damned thing. A rat, I told myself, a big one, dragging something. Yeah, that had to be it. Then there's the cold. It's specific. It only happens when I walk past the door to screening room 7. That theater's been sealed shut for as long as I've worked here. Manager says there's structural damage. The door is padlocked, a thick chain wrapped around the handles. But every time I pass it, even on a warm night, a blast of cold air hits me. It's not a draft. It's a dead, frigid patch of air that clings to your skin and sinks right into your bones. It makes the hairs on my arms stand up and a shiver crawl its way up my spine. I just pull my jacket tighter and blame the building's fucked up ventilation. What else could it be? The worst, though, is seeing things. Or thinking I see things. Little movements right at the edge of my vision. A flicker of black just past a doorway. A shape that seems to shift in a dimly lit corner. I'll whip my head around, my heart doing a little stutter step in my chest, and it's gone. Just a poster on the wall or a shadow cast by the exit sign. Fuck, I'd think. I'm tired. Too many night shifts, too much coffee. It's my eyes playing tricks on me. It has to be. My anchor, my proof that everything is normal, is the old popcorn machine. That piece of shit is possessed, but in a way I can understand. It's this massive chrome and glass monster from the 70s. Half the time the wiring shorts out. So, in the middle of a dead quiet lobby, it will suddenly roar to life. The motor will grind, the heating element will click, and the stirring arm will clatter against the kettle for about 5 seconds. Clank, clank, whir, click. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stops. The first few times it happened, I nearly jumped out of my skin. Now it's almost comforting. It's a real problem with a real explanation. Faulty wiring. Simple. Tonight, it happened again. I was sweeping up spilled popcorn, my back to the concession stand. The theater was empty. The last customer had left an hour ago. Clank, clank, whir, click. I didn't even flinch. Fucking wiring, I muttered to the empty lobby. I finished sweeping and was about to dump the dustpan when I heard it again. Not the machine. Scrape. Thud. It was closer this time, coming from the hallway, definitely from the hallway. My hands tightened on the broom handle, my breath hitched. It's a rat. It's a big fucking rat. A rat with a limp. Scrape. Thud. It sounded like it was just around the corner now, just beyond the edge of the light. I stood frozen, every muscle in my body screaming at me to either run or swing this broom like a madman. My brain, my logical brain, was scrambling for an answer. The pipes, the building settling, anything. Then a cold spot formed right behind me. Not a draft, that same dead cold from outside screening room 7. It settled over my shoulders like a heavy, wet blanket. I could feel goosebumps erupt all over my skin. I didn't dare turn around. I just stood there, staring into the dark hallway, listening to the slow, dragging footsteps that were getting closer, and feeling a cold that had absolutely no reason to exist. And for the first time in my life, standing in the one place on earth I always felt safe, my logic was failing me. There was no explanation, not for all of it happening at once. That night, I didn't lock up. I just left. I dropped the dustpan, the clatter echoing way too loud in the lobby, and walked out the front door, leaving it unlocked behind me. I didn't care. Let someone rob the place. Let them steal the ancient cash register and the stale candy. Good for them. My apartment felt different. The familiar comfort was gone, replaced by a low hum of anxiety that had followed me home from the theater. Every creak of the floorboards in the unit above me made me jump. Every siren in the distance sounded like a scream. My rational brain, the part of me that had always been in charge, was taking a back seat. It was still there, whispering things like overtired and stress, but its voice was getting drowned out by a much louder, simpler thought. Something is wrong. The next few days at work were a new kind of hell. I wasn't just doing my job anymore. I was on patrol. I was an observer in my own life, constantly watching, constantly listening. My ears were tuned to the building's frequency. I started trying to map the sounds, to find a pattern. The plumbing in the west wall groans around 10 p.m. The main breaker box buzzes when the big projector is running. The old building breathes. I knew its rhythm. But the other sounds, they didn't fit. The footsteps were the worst. They weren't random anymore. They seemed to have intent. One night, I was doing a final walkthrough. I stepped into the main corridor, the one leading to the sealed-off theaters. The air was still and heavy with the smell of old paper. I took 10 steps down the runner carpet. Scrape. Thud. It came from the darkness further down the hall. I froze, my hand tightening on my flashlight. I didn't move a muscle. I didn't even breathe. For a full minute, there was nothing, just the frantic pounding of my heart against my ribs. Then I took one slow, deliberate step backward. A beat of silence. Scrape. Thud. It had moved too. It had taken a step forward. It was matching me. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. This wasn't a rat. This wasn't the building settling. This was a game. A horrible, slow-motion game of cat and mouse, and I had no fucking clue what the rules were. I backed away slowly, my eyes fixed on the impenetrable dark. The footsteps mirrored my retreat, always keeping the same distance, a patient predator in the shadows. When my back hit the lobby wall, I spun around and practically ran to the safety of the lit-up concession stand. My fortress of logic was crumbling brick by brick. A few nights later, I found the popcorn. It was after the last showing of some cheap action flick. The last 2 patrons, a couple of teenagers, had left half an hour ago. I'd seen them out myself. I was getting ready to mop the lobby when I noticed it. I was just glancing toward the hallway, a nervous habit I'd picked up, when my eyes caught something on a seat inside Theater 3, the one closest to the hall. The door was propped open for airing out. Sitting perfectly upright, in the center of a seat in the very back row, was a small box of popcorn. I stood there for a second, just looking at it. Maybe the kids left it. But no, I'd cleaned that theater myself. I swept every row. That seat was empty. I walked over to it, my sneakers sticking slightly to the floor. The closer I got, the more the smell hit me. Not old popcorn, it smelled fresh, buttery, warm. My hand trembled as I reached out, not to touch the box, but the air just above it. I could feel the heat rising off it. Someone had made this, just now. My head whipped around. "Hello?" I called out, my voice weak. Silence answered. I looked back at the box. It was like a fucking offering, a friendly gesture from something I was pretty sure wasn't friendly at all. A chill, completely separate from the building's usual drafts, ran right through me. I didn't want it. I grabbed the box with the tips of my fingers, the cardboard still warm and slightly greasy, and marched straight to the big trash can behind the counter. I threw it in and shoved a bunch of crumpled napkins on top of it, burying it. I needed it out of sight. I needed to pretend it never happened. But the nightmares started that week. I'd dream I was back in the theater, but it was wrong. The hallways were longer, stretching into impossible distances. The doors would all be for screening room 7. I'd be running, but my feet felt like they were stuck in mud, and behind me, I could hear it. Always the same sound. Scrape, thud, scrape, thud. I'd wake up tangled in my sheets, my heart hammering against my chest. And one night, I swear to God, I woke up because I heard it, not in the dream. I was wide awake, staring at my bedroom ceiling, and I heard it from the hallway outside my apartment, faint but unmistakable. Scrape, thud. I lay there, paralyzed, until the sun came up. That was it. That was the last straw. My job, my weird little bubble of safety, was bleeding into my life. It was following me home. I couldn't rationalize it away anymore. I couldn't sweep it under the rug with the rest of the trash. I had to know. The next day, instead of sleeping, I was hunched over my laptop, the screen lighting up my dark apartment. I typed "The Grand Majestic History" into the search bar. Pages of old movie times, a few articles about its grand opening in the 1920s, nothing useful. I tried again. The Grand Majestic Accident. The Grand Majestic Death. Still nothing, just fluff pieces about its historic charm. It was a dead end. I felt a surge of frustration, but I wasn't giving up. There had to be something. If the internet was a bust, I'd have to find another way. The answer had to be inside that building. My chance came during a dead-slow Tuesday shift. There wasn't a single customer for hours. My manager was off. It was just me. I told myself I was just doing some deep cleaning, tackling areas that hadn't been touched in years. It was a flimsy excuse, but it was enough. I started near the back, by the corridor, focusing on the area around the padlocked door of screening room 7. The dust was thick back here, coating everything in a fine gray powder. I was sweeping behind a stack of old water-damaged movie posters when my broom hit something small and metallic, a dull clink against the concrete floor. I knelt down, using my phone's flashlight to see into the grime under the lowest poster. There, half buried in dust bunnies and filth, was a small silver chain. I pulled it out. On the end of the chain was a locket. It was small, tarnished, almost black with age, with a simple floral pattern etched onto the front, the kind of thing a little kid would wear. It felt cold in my palm, a dense, solid piece of history. My thumb found the tiny clasp, and with a bit of pressure, it popped open. It was empty. 2 small oval frames stared back at me, vacant. Whatever pictures were once inside were long gone. I stood up, the locket heavy in my hand. This was different. This wasn't a sound, or a cold spot, or a feeling. This was real. I could hold it. It was a piece of someone's story. A story that ended right here, in the dust, next to a door that was never, ever opened. My online search was pointless. I wasn't going to find the answer in old newspaper archives. The story wasn't in the building's history. It was in its people. I needed to talk to someone who remembered, someone who had been coming here for a long, long time, someone who might know who this locket belonged to. My fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but now it had a new companion. A desperate, driving need to find an answer. The locket felt heavy in my pocket, a constant, cold reminder pressing against my leg with every step. I'd spent the last couple of days with my head on a swivel, watching every person who walked through the doors of the Grand Majestic. I wasn't just looking for customers anymore. I was looking for someone who looked like they belonged here. Someone whose face held the same lines and cracks as the theater's old plaster walls. The internet had given me nothing, just glossy articles about Art Deco architecture. But a building doesn't have memories. People do. My fear was still there, a knot of ice in my stomach that wouldn't melt, but something else had joined it, a desperate need for an answer. I felt like I was walking around with a puzzle piece in my hand, and I just needed to find the one person who knew where it fit. My chance came on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were always dead. The rain outside didn't help, slicking the streets and keeping people home. For 2 hours, my only company was the hum of the popcorn machine and the slow tick of the clock above the candy display. Then, the front door swung open with a soft sigh, and Mrs. Gable shuffled in, shaking a clear plastic rain bonnet off her tight gray curls. Mrs. Gable was a fixture. Every Tuesday, like clockwork, she'd come for the 4:30 p.m. showing of whatever classic the theater was running that week. She was a small, stooped woman with kind, watery blue eyes and a smile that seemed permanently etched onto her face. She was the walking, talking embodiment of the theater's good old days. If anyone knew its secrets, it was her. "Just one for Casablanca, Alex dear," she said, sliding a crumpled $5 bill across the sticky counter. Her voice was thin, like old paper. "Of course, Mrs. Gable." I tore off a ticket, but instead of just handing it to her, I held on for a second. My heart was starting to beat a little faster. This was it. "You know," I started, trying to sound casual, just making conversation. "You must have seen a lot of movies here over the years." She chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. "Oh, heavens, yes. I had my first date in this very building, Theater 4. We saw Singin' in the Rain. My Walter stepped on my foot during the big dance number, spilled his soda all over my new poodle skirt." She beamed at the memory. "Been comin' ever since." This was my opening. I leaned against the counter, trying to look relaxed, like this was just a funny thought that popped into my head. "I get that. I feel attached to this place, too. It's strange. I have this one really strong memory here from when I was a little kid." "Oh," she said, her interest piqued. She rested her small, wrinkled hands on the edge of the counter. "Yeah, I must have been about 6. I got separated from my parents right here in the lobby, wandered off. I ended up down that long hallway back there. I nodded my head toward the darkness that led to the sealed-off theaters. I was terrified, crying my eyes out. It felt like the hall just went on forever. I paused, seeing the memory clear as day in my own mind. But then, one of the security guards found me. An older guy, really kind. He had this limp. I remember the sound of his foot dragging a little on the floor. I could almost hear it now. That soft, rhythmic scrape, thud. He was wearing this old, faded blue baseball cap. He didn't say much, just calmed me down, gave me a small box of popcorn, and walked me right back out to the lobby. My parents were freaking out, but I just felt safe. It's why I've always felt safe here, I think. I finished my story with a small, genuine smile. It was my story, the one good, solid thing I could hold on to this place. Mrs. Gable was quiet for a moment. She tilted her head, her brow furrowing just a little, the way people do when they're digging through old boxes in their mind. She looked past me, toward the hallway, her eyes unfocused. "A lost little boy," she murmured, more to herself than to me. She nodded slowly. "Oh, yes, I remember that. The whole town was talking about it." A wave of relief washed over me. She remembered. It was real. She looked back at me, her gaze sharpening, and her expression wasn't nostalgic anymore. It was sad, pitying. "That was around 98, I think," she said, her voice flat, matter-of-fact. "Such a terribly sad business. A little boy got lost in here during a busy Saturday night showing." She took the ticket from my still outstretched hand. "They never did find him, you know." The air left my lungs in a silent rush. The hum of the popcorn machines suddenly seemed deafening. "What? No, that's not right. He found me. The guard. He found me and brought me back." My voice sounded thin and stupid to my own ears. Mrs. Gable gave me a patient, gentle smile, the kind you give a child who doesn't understand. "I think you must be mixing up your memories, dear. It happens when we're young. The boy who was lost that night was never found. It was a tragedy." She started to turn away, then stopped, as if remembering another small, insignificant detail. "But the strangest part of it all," she added, her voice dropping a little, "the thing everyone whispered about afterward, the only security guard working that night was old Mr. Peterson, a sweet man, but he couldn't have helped anyone. He'd had a massive heart attack in the employee break room. They said he'd been dead for at least a couple of hours before that poor little boy even went missing." She gave my hand a final sympathetic pat. "You enjoy the movie, dear," she said, and then she shuffled off toward Theater 2, leaving me standing alone at the counter. The world went quiet. The clock wasn't ticking. The rain wasn't drumming on the roof. My own breathing had stopped. The story that had been the foundation of my life, the one solid pillar in the creepy, decaying structure of the Grand Majestic, had just been demolished, pulverized into dust. My memory was a lie. He didn't exist. My eyes, wide and unblinking, drifted from the empty space where Mrs. Gable had stood. They moved past the candy, past the soda fountain, and landed on the dusty, forgotten corner behind the ticket booth. On the battered cardboard box with the words "Lost and Found" scrawled on the side in faded black marker. And sticking out from under a gray, moth-eaten scarf was a swatch of worn, stained fabric. It was blue. I stood there, paralyzed, the roll of tickets in my hand suddenly feeling as cold and heavy as a stone. My gaze was dragged, pulled by an invisible force, away from the box and toward the yawning, black mouth of the corridor at the far end of the lobby, the hallway that led to Screening Room 7, the place where a scared little boy had gotten lost in the dark. I wasn't the lucky one. I wasn't the kid who was found. I was the one they never found. The guard with the kind eyes and the limping walk wasn't real. The warm popcorn wasn't real. The hand that took mine wasn't real. A coldness that had nothing to do with the building's drafts seeped into my bones, a deep cellular cold that started in my gut and spread outwards. A single question formed in the wreckage of my mind, sharp and clear and utterly terrifying. If it wasn't him, then what the hell led me out of the dark that night?